up, and welcome to Haydn Behind the Music Stand. I'm your host, Patty Ryan, and with me is Doug Machiz, who is the co-founder and president of Friction Quartet and Friction Performing Arts, based in San Francisco, California. He is also on the faculty at the Crowden School in Berkeley, and we'll be talking about his life's calling to fight climate change and to encourage others to follow suit through his musical pursuits. Welcome, Doug. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Patty. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. So I think we were entering first year masters at the same time at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music. Is that right?
Yeah, I was doing actually a postgrad diploma, but yeah,
right.
We did enter the same year.
Yeah, that's right. And you were in Jennifer Culp's studio and I was in John Michel's studio, but I felt like at that school there's so much interwovenness between the studios that it wasn't like, I felt like we were all kind of just one big cello family.
Absolutely, and especially because we played some cello quartets together in the BART station, and yeah, we all hung out.
Yeah, totally. Can you share with me your most insane performance story?
Yeah, so Friction Quartet, about 3 years ago, we did a contract on a cruise ship, the Holland America Line, in a program called Lincoln Center Stage. And we were on the ship with a piano player for 4 months, and we cruised from Alaska down to Mexico, through the Panama Canal, into the Caribbean, back through the Panama Canal, and over to Hawaii, and then back to San Diego. So it was a really, really cool journey. And obviously a lot of crazy things happened on the ship. Typically we would be performing in 10 to 15 foot swells and whatnot, and it was pretty crazy, sometimes almost falling out of our chairs. But I think the most memorable performance moment for me was we were in the middle of a concert and the captain came on the loudspeaker and said there was a man overboard and that they were turning the ship around to look for the person that fell in the water. And I'm pretty sure there's a very high chance of fatality when someone falls off the ship. It's like more likely than not that when someone falls off, they will die. So we were all obviously super disturbed and scared and sad. And so after the announcement, we just gave everyone in the audience the opportunity to take a minute to leave and come back, or if they just wanted to leave, you know, that would be totally fine. But we decided we would just keep playing, even though it was the Titanic. Even though it was such a tense moment, and we were near the end of our show, and the program consisted of a mix of classical and pop arrangements. And so I'm pretty sure we were about to move into Blackbird by the Beatles, which is a really beautiful song, and it was a nice arrangement. And so it was just a really potent moment for me to be wondering if this person was going to be okay. And then playing the Beatles was just really soothing in that moment. It ended up actually being a false alarm and no one had fallen off. It was,
thank goodness.
The theory was that a child had like thrown a life jacket off the ship or something off their balcony and someone saw it and called it in. So thankfully it was totally fine. But in that moment, we didn't know.
Yeah, of course. Wow. Well, I'm glad that was a happy ending for sure.
Yeah, me too.
But definitely moments like that, it's like music can really soothe or distract and soothe the moment too. I'm sure all the passengers were happy, or the ones that at least stayed for the performance were happy that you were chugging along. So.
Yeah, I think everyone stayed. So
yeah. Okay. All right. Can you tell me about Boyd?
Yes, I would love to tell you about Boyd. He is my obsession these days. In February, my wife and I decided to get a pandemic cat. We didn't decide pandemic cat. We had been wanting to get a cat for a long time, and we finally felt ready to do so after moving into a new home in Concord, California. So we found him at the local pet store. He was 1.5 years old when we got him, and his name was Boyd when we got him. And for a while, we were considering trying to come up with our own personal name for him, but we just decided Boyd is kind of strange and fun. It just stuck. It seemed right.
Yeah.
So Boyd is a gray and white tabby, and he's super cute, and he loves to get on my shoulder every morning multiple times.
Oh,
yeah. He sort of has these phases of the day. Like in the morning, he wants to be on my shoulder. In the middle of the day, he wants to be on my lap. And at night, he just wants to play and run around and not be on a lap or a shoulder.
Oh, that's kind of the best combination of a lot of things though. Cause like, what if that was reversed and he was trying to play with you in the morning when you're just like waking up and stuff?
Yeah. I mean, it is a bit of a logistical challenge to have Boyd on my shoulder when I'm like making coffee and oatmeal and stuff.
Oh, sure.
But I can make it work, you know, and he's okay with it.
Yeah. Oh, he sounds so sweet. Give him a little pet rub for me.
I will.
All right. Are you ready for some Spitfire questions?
Yes.
Mahler or Bruckner?
Mahler. But that's a close one. Oh, sorry. I guess I shouldn't do follow-ups because it's Spitfire.
No, it's okay.
No, it's okay. Mahler.
Debussy or Ravel?
That's so hard.
Which string quartets do you prefer? I'm just kidding. Okay. Cats or dogs?
Now, cats. When I was a kid, dogs.
Yeah. Appetizer or dessert?
Dessert.
Sparkling or still water?
Sparkling. Yay, SodaStream.
Yeah, right? I know.
Yeah, life changer.
It's funny because like when I first got my job, I was like, oh my God, I can finally afford a SodaStream. And it took me like 4 years to actually get one. But it's really changed my life. I drink it all the time. Fan favorite question, alternate universe musical instrument?
Drums.
Oh.
Yeah, I would play the drums. I think I've always admired the ability to use all four limbs at once. And I think it sounds awesome. And especially jazz drumming. Like I love the jazz drum solo.
Tell me if you agree or disagree. I've thought a lot of times for string quartet specifically, if we were to, be like a rock band version of that, what would the role of the cellist be? And I would think that our role would be primarily drummer, but also a little bit of like bass.
Oh, for sure.
Electric bass. Like those two combined at once. So I guess I feel you when you say drums, because so much of what we do is setting the texture and tone, the energy of a piece, and also rhythmic stability. So.
Yeah. And I've had string quartet members throughout my life just say, I really appreciate that your rhythm is steady, because if the cello isn't steady, it just makes the whole group unstable and not fun.
Totally. So. Yeah. Early bird or night owl?
Early bird, especially
Pandemic?
now that I have a cat.
Sure. Yeah. Pandemic guilty pleasure?
I guess just like getting into YouTube wormholes, spending way too much time just going to those related videos.
That all those algorithms get you, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Any particular wormhole that you wanted to share with us?
Lots of Colbert, lots of John Oliver, for sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so
just
like
watching his
satire.
John Oliver's entire archive, basically.
Yeah, he's pretty funny. I like him a lot, too.
Yeah, me too.
Favorite professor shout-out?
Gotta go with Jennifer Colt. She was such a supportive force for me when I was in school. And since being out of school, I mean, I'm 10 years out of school now, and Jennifer still emails me to say like, hey, how's it going? Let's get coffee. And also, here's like this competition that made me think of you. And yeah, love Jennifer.
She's so wonderful. And her presence is just so motherly.
Yeah.
Aw, tell her I say hi if
I
you
will.
get a chance. Most inspired musical hero of any genre?
I mean, right now I'm really into Augustine Hadalich. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce his name, but I just love his devotion to excellent performing and the different types of repertoire he plays. And he brings the same passion to all his repertoire. And he's super active on social media and like putting content out there. So yeah, really like his stuff right now.
Yeah, he's so awesome. I feel like when I was growing up and watching all the masters of the time, like Oistrakh or Gil Shaham or Janine Jensen or Anne-Sophie Muth, all these people, like, I feel like where could they take it further? Like, how could it possibly get any better than this? And I feel like when I listen to him, I'm finding so many new things about each of these pieces that I hold so dear and close to my heart. Yeah, it's just so wonderful. Like, wow, what a wonderful sound. What a wonderful interpretation of things. And I'm so looking forward to how his career continues to blossom, because it's already blossoming.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Most transformative performance experience?
For me, when I think of transformative, that encompasses how I'm feeling while performing and what the music is, and also like the audience and the vibe of the hall and everything. And I guess what comes to mind is this concert that Friction Quartet played a few years ago in a small town in Denmark, in this church that was probably 400 years old or something like that, many hundreds of years old. And we were playing Beethoven Opus 59 No. 1 Quartet, and I just felt really confident and like on top of everything and felt in sync with the other members. And that was just a very cathartic performance for me, where I felt like I was totally in the music and in control.
Nice. When those moments happen, you feel like all of what you've practiced and worked toward has finally opened up and let you just like emote, that kind of feeling?
Yeah. Definitely.
That it's just like everything was worth it.
And I think it is, well, for me, it is kind of rare. Maybe great performers feel this more often. But yeah, for me, it's just a handful of times where I've had that feeling of almost like, oh, I'm flying. I can do anything.
Actually, that reminded me of what Jennifer would always teach us, was soaring in music. Yeah. Desert island piece of any genre?
Well, I just played the cello quartet version of the Bach Chaconne.
Oh, sure.
And I mean,
Did we play that together too?
I think we did. Yeah. I remember we played it at SFCM, and it was the same arrangement from the SFCM library. And yeah, I think that's a great piece. If you're just going to have one piece, it's just so perfectly constructed and beautiful and emotional and hits all the right heartstrings for me. Yeah, Bach Chaconne.
Totally. Speaking of the Chaconne, chaconne and of Augustine. Did you see the mashup video of all the violinists during the pandemic put together chaconne in one video?
I heard about it, but no, I didn't see it. I'll have to check that out. Is he in there?
It's his project,
okay.
But he invites all these star-studded cast of violinists, and it's just so interesting to watch them do little segments of the chaconne in a row. I think they each individually performed the whole thing, so it seems like as if it's not like they just started at this one spot. Yeah, but I found it so intriguing how many different versions and interpretations of this one piece there was amongst, I can't remember how many violinists there were, but just, a small portion of them, of what is possible in our field.
I think especially Bach's music is a really great window into the soul of a player. It's beautifully composed, but it's kind of like a blank canvas, right? There aren't a lot of performance instructions, so it's like your whole history of training combined with how you feel in the moment. I think it's really good at that.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of describing that, actually. Thank you so much. Yeah, like there's so much history behind everything that you do. And as you say, Bach is such a beautiful canvas.
Yeah.
I digress. You've finished the Spitfire questions. Congratulations.
Thanks.
All right. Doug, can you walk me through your musical origin story? How did you discover music? How did you discover the cello? When did you decide it was going to be your calling in life to become a musician? And the steps along the way, your education to where you are today, and how did you form Friction and all that stuff?
All right. Life history. Here we go. Well, when I was 6 years old, my older brother really wanted to study piano. And from that very young age up until probably 13 or 14 years old, I basically just copied everything my older brother did because he's the coolest, he is the coolest. So I also took piano lessons and I ended up really liking it, and it came to me pretty easily, and I liked working hard. So I ended up getting a lot more serious at piano than he did. He ended up dropping it eventually. And so I was pretty serious about it until age 13. And then when I was in middle school, I started taking classical guitar as well as bass guitar and electric guitar. And I guess I was searching for my musical voice, and I really liked rock bands and punk and ska bands at the time. So playing bass was a nice connection to that world. I played in a band for a while when I was in middle school, playing bass guitar, studied jazz guitar a little bit. And then it was when I was in 8th grade, the high school orchestra came to my middle school to perform the Brahms Academic Festival Overture. And at that point, my older brother had joined that orchestra playing acoustic bass. But when the high school orchestra came and played, the sound just completely convinced me, like, this is it. This is what I want to be a part of. And my brother told me that the orchestra needed more cello players, which actually is like kind of crazy because I've found as an educator that often there are a ton of cellos. There's like an abundance of cellos in youth orchestras and things like that. But anyway, they needed cello players, and so that seemed like the fast track to being in the advanced orchestra. And so I had to initially join the beginner orchestra and then audition in. So I started taking private lessons that summer after 8th grade, and it was coming really naturally to me. My teacher was like, wow, this is great. I'm going to give you music that's probably harder than music you should be playing for where you're at, but it's a lot of fun to like see you progressing so fast. So it's just a quick digression. I feel like, since I teach cello now, I want to be careful not to do that, not to like give people harder and harder music just because they can do it. Like I really want students to reach a really high level on whatever repertoire they're on before moving on. But anyway, so I joined the high school orchestra and local youth orchestra as well. Yeah, I was just having so much fun being part of that community and being part of this incredibly powerful sound, playing this beautiful music from the past. And so I decided I wanted to try and get into music school. So it was sort of a mad dash. Obviously starting in 8th grade is really late for a cellist to enter a university or conservatory program. So I was practicing really hard and going to summer music programs and things like that. And it was a bit stressful. And all the while I was also balancing my musical interest with my interest in meteorology, which maybe we'll talk about later. So I was actually applying to both meteorology and music schools. And I ended up...
That sounds stressful.
Yeah, and then I ended up getting into several like really great meteorology programs. So that path was there for me if I wanted to take it. But I ended up getting into Boston University. It was the only music school I got into, and I really liked my time visiting Boston, and I decided I wanted to go for the music path, and I felt like it was worth the risk. Yeah, go ahead.
what happened to piano?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, as I got more into bass guitar and cello, I definitely lost some interest in piano, and I really regret that now because I would love to be able to play piano as well as I did when I was a child, and I basically forgot everything.
Never too late.
Yeah.
My other question, though, was what was it about music that, despite all your opportunities in meteorology, you had so many openings and then you had one for music? What was your logic behind that?
Yeah, I think in the end, it was all about emotional connection. With the weather, it was super fascinating to me, but I felt like if I did that, it would feel more like a job rather than a passion that I was doing as my job. Because for a lot of meteorologists, it's kind of a desk job. You could be on camera, but it's not so much like engaging one-on-one with the weather, being in the storm or something like that, or being in the clouds. You could specifically get jobs that do those things, but I wasn't really looking at that. And those moments of catharsis for me with weather were more like, oh, when this amazing weather event happens once every 5 or 10 years, it's so exciting. But it's not really a day-to-day excitement, or it wasn't for me. Whereas playing in the orchestra, I just got such a strong emotional reaction when I would be a part of a really good performance. And it's just something I felt like I could repeat over and over again, getting that emotional response and also sharing music with people. And it's much more, music is all about community and social interaction. And I think that is a really wonderful ingredient for happiness. So it just felt like a more sustainable path to contentment.
Nice. Well, I obviously am biased and agree with you, but okay, regardless, you went to Boston University for your undergraduate.
Yeah. So I started working with a teacher there that it wasn't really working for me. And I actually was considering transferring to one of those meteorology programs at one point because I didn't feel like I was getting better and I felt frustrated and kind of lonely and just the confusion of like entering that new chapter of life. But I ended up switching teachers and he really set me on the right path and got my technical foundation was not great. And so I was with a teacher that didn't really know how to help me with that. But the teacher I switched to, that's his specialty, basically, like really setting up a good technical foundation and giving me a roadmap to growth. So that kind of saved me and kept me in the program. And then I also played in my first string quartet when I was at Boston University, and that was super exciting and eventually changed my path from going for an orchestra position to trying to form a string quartet. So that was sort of the beginning of that story. And actually it was working on Beethoven Opus 59 number 1 that was kind of a formative moment for me. So it's kind of cool that became my transformative performance moment as well.
It keeps circling back in some way.
Yeah. After Boston University, I went to UT Austin and studied with Beyond Sang and also a little bit with Josh Jindal from the Miro Quartet. And it was at UT that I also really became confident that I wanted to do chamber music because they had a string quartet in residence, the Miro, and then they also had graduate quartet in residence program. The Aeolus Quartet was in that position, and I got to spend a lot of time with them and hear them play a lot, and it was just so inspiring. It was just like when I heard the orchestra play in high school. I knew that I wanted that small team, family type of situation where you have people that you support and that support you, and you are working on some of the best repertoire ever written, and it's also completely mobile and low overhead expense, to put on a string quartet concert versus an orchestra concert. It's just a lot simpler to make it happen and to travel and bring music to people. So it felt like the right path. With that in mind, I was at the Zephyr Chamber Music Festival in Italy, run by a lot of the San Francisco Conservatory teachers, including Jennifer. So when I was still enrolled at UT, I was thinking about going to SFCM to study with Jennifer. And at that festival, I reunited with Kevin Rogers, the violinist who also went to SFCM. And I say reunited because in high school, we were actually roommates at Eastern Music Festival in North Carolina. So we already knew each other. And I remember before I went to Zephyr, he sent me a Facebook message and was like, hey, I'm going to be at Zephyr with you. It's going to be cool to see you again. And yeah, we played Philip Glass third string quartet together at Zephyr. And we were really hitting it off musically and personally. And I thought he would be a great person to start a string quartet with, especially because he was really into contemporary music. And at some point when I was at UT, I realized I really like improvisation and contemporary music and all the possibilities there. And I knew that there weren't a lot of string quartets that specialize in contemporary music. So I felt like there was an unmet need there. There probably still is. There's a lot more quartets today doing that, I think, than there were 10 years ago, which is awesome. But especially at that time, it felt like there were just a handful of them. So that was my goal. And then I asked Kevin if he wanted to form a group with me. And he said that was something he had always wanted to do since he was 16 years old. And so when I got to San Francisco, we immediately started the quartet right when I joined San Francisco Conservatory.
I mean, now that you're a nonprofit, and what season are you starting with Friction?
This is our 10th year.
Okay, so, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
But what is that like to start a quartet from the ground up? I joined as a quartet already, like that was running its 30th season. So
it was really exciting. A wide open road. Basically, you could do anything you wanted. There isn't any preset mission or management or anything. You are all of that. So it's obviously a lot of work, and it takes a lot of imagination to see what it is you want to do and then figure out how to accomplish it. But I felt that having an excellent team to work with, Kevin, and also Otis Harriel joined us very shortly thereafter. The structure was there, basically being in San Francisco and being adjacent to a great composition department. It was really natural to start putting on concerts and playing music by these composers and building a base of video and audio content to start getting more opportunities with. So I think it was really exciting, and I never really was uncertain about it. It felt like the right thing for me to be doing.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it could be so intimidating for so many musicians to do that. Was it challenging for you in any way to shift a little bit of gears between being the musician Doug and being the administration Doug?
It wasn't actually challenging. I know it could be for a lot of people, but I always just enjoyed the satisfaction of getting a task done. I actually really liked the academic work of, high school and college, and like sort of these, things like writing an essay or learning how to do something. I always kind of liked that part of school. And so it felt like I could jump into some of those roles starting a quartet. So it was a good feeling to put into words what it is we do and why it's important and why like a foundation or something should support us commissioning a specific composer or playing in a school system. It felt good to get those types of tasks done, and like it was working towards a purpose I believed in.
Yeah. So entering your 10th season, what projects are you looking forward to?
Well, it's 10th season with an asterisk because we really had to basically cancel last season, as most organizations did. So a lot of this season is really just getting everything done that was supposed to be done in our 9th season. One of which is performing and recording works by 5 young composers. It was going to be 6. One of our composers wasn't able to complete the project. So we have 5 young composers that we raised money to commission as part of our Young Composers Commissioning Initiative. So those pieces were all done before the pandemic, and we were going to premiere them in April of 2020. So now this December, we're finally going to be bringing those pieces to the world. We have actually recorded one of them. Actually, no, we've recorded 2 of them. So the piece for Kari Watson, she wanted to use it for her graduate school applications. And so we were able to get that done actually, I think, before the pandemic. And then another piece by Carolina Bragg. She's a high school age composer. She was asked by From the Top to be on their show and to feature her music. So From the Top actually helped fund a recording of Carolina's piece that we commissioned from her. So that piece is also now available to listen to, and both pieces came out excellent. Really like them. And the other composers are Benjamin Champion. I'm super excited about his music. Theo Haber, who is someone who Friction Quartet has worked with before in the John Adams Young Composers Program at Crowden, where I teach. And then I'm blanking on the last one right now. But anyway, so we're going to be performing those pieces in December. I'm really excited about that project. And we're going to be getting ready to launch our fundraiser for our next commissioning initiative project. So basically, it's something we're trying to do every other year. And we want to alternate each cycle between young composers and career composers, just so we're able to reach out to those dream composers we've always wanted to work with and try to raise money to make something happen. But we also are supporting the next generation of composers.
Yeah, I mean, I applaud you for all that work. I know how much work that is to do and to organize. Fundraising is always a challenge.
Yeah.
And I also think it's amazing that you are a vehicle for these composers. And I also understand how difficult it is for a lot of composers to get their works played or their imagination realized, So it's a wonderful endeavor that you're doing.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and then going on to like what's in the next season, something we wanted to do with last season was to each member member of the quartet get to curate our own concert. I mean, what a dream, right? To be able to do anything you want. So I just put my concert together, and the working title is Dialogue. The two main pieces are going to be Le Grand Méridien, pardon my French, by French-Canadian composer Walter Boudreau, and Dig Deep by Julia Wolfe. And both of those pieces are a dialogue between these two musical worlds that are oscillating between each other and sort of battling out for which voice is going to be more dominant. With the Boudreau, it's a Renaissance composer named Thomas de Victoria, a motet by this composer that Walter Boudreau uses as sort of the source material. And then he has his own contemporary experimental voice, and these two voices are battling it out. It's a really, really cool piece that Friction played a couple years ago in Montreal. And then Dig Deep by Julia Wolfe is just a classic contemporary quartet that I've always wanted to play. So I'm super excited about that one. And then piece by Annika Sokolovsky, who's another living composer that everyone in the quartet actually agrees is like awesome music. So that'll be a nice kind of more tranquil piece to balance these intense works.
Sure. What is it like collaborating with a composer?
It can be all over the map. I mean, I think it's overall really amazing experience that I'm grateful for, because obviously notation is not a perfect art. It's something that composers are always crafting to try and communicate the sounds in their head onto a page for someone else to interpret. So there are going to be different interpretations, and the ability to have a conversation about that interpretation and about what the composer meant versus what you think the music should sound like. There's a lot of give and take there on both sides. And sometimes we as performers influence what the composer ultimately wants, which is really exciting, because if they wrote that same piece for a different group of performers, the final product may have ended up differently. So I think that's a great opportunity for us to put our stamp on a piece, being the first people to perform it. And I think it's so fun to perform the piece and then have a chat with the composer after and see how they felt about it, and hopefully that they were really happy with how it turned out. And I love having the composer at the first performance to speak to the audience before and after the concert, just about how it all went. Yeah, we're bringing the composer's music to life, and having that artist there is really important.
Yeah. Do you feel like in the first rehearsal or whenever the composer first shows up, there's a lot of collaboration between the ensemble and the composer? Or like, is it more of a joint kind of composition experience? Or is it more or less, are we doing this right based on what you wrote notation-wise in the music?
I mean, it can go a lot of different ways. Sometimes the piece is complete in that first rehearsal and we've already rehearsed it, and it's sort of just tweaking sounds here and there and interpretation. But then sometimes it's a complete blank slate where the composer is still imagining what the piece is going to be. I think a good example of that is our collaboration with Andy Akiho. He wrote a piano quintet for us, supported by Chamber Music America, their classical commissioning program. And he happened to be super swamped at the time and really behind on his projects. So when we had scheduled our first retreat together to work on the piece, he hadn't written anything. So the first retreat was basically us playing some other music by him so he could get to know us as people and as players. And the second retreat we had with him, he still hadn't written anything for us to play. So we played more music by him, and we also recorded some sounds that he could use to build his piece out. And then he ended up actually naming each movement after each player of the group, which is really cool. And then the piece itself was named after the violist at the time, Taya Warbelow. It's called The War Below. And so like us as performers, our DNA is like intertwined with that piece forever. And so I think that's a great example of like, yeah, the piece is really connected with who commissioned it and who played it. So yeah, it's like,
that's awesome.
It's a really broad spectrum of experiences.
Yeah, and Andy is such a huge composer name, and I've had the pleasure of playing some of his pieces too. So that's so awesome that you get like a musical dedication in that way.
Yeah, I'll be grateful for it forever.
Are you ready to take a break, Doug?
Ready for a break.
Great, we'll be right back. Welcome back from the break. So in part one, you were talking about your passion for meteorology, or your budding passion, I should say, for meteorology in high school. how does that relate with your now fight to stop climate change?
Well, I've always been passionate about the outdoors and hiking and seeing all the beautiful places that our planet has to offer. And I've also been really in tune with the atmospheric and oceanic science side of things. I read meteorology books, I watched Weather Channel and things like that, and went on weather forums to kind of follow storms as they were developing. So I've also been really interested in the atmosphere and things like that. I've been kind of watching with horror as like the weather gets more and more severe and fires are getting more and more severe, and the feeling of impending water shortages and things like that, it's really palpable here in California because there are communities, within an hour's drive of San Francisco that, they're on the well system, which is more vulnerable, but they're running out of water and things like that. And there's the news about the Colorado River running low. So it's just really at the forefront of our consciousness, I think, and of the headlines. And it's been building, of course, over the past 5 to 10 years. Just it's becoming less an issue of Republicans completely denying that it exists and more like, well, it's not humans that did it, whatever. But it's obviously something that some experts argue like, okay, it's already too late. And some experts say like, well, we got to do everything we can right now. So it's something that I think about a lot and I'm worried about, but I also enjoy learning about ways that we can help to slow it down or fight it.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously this is a huge topic, and especially I am in so much agreement with you that it's one of the top priorities of humanity for any of the world to continue to exist as we know it. I mean, it's almost like, how do you even start talking about it? How do you start acting? How do you start doing things that might help shift the scale?
Yeah.
I mean, I know some
and I
things,
think,
but
Friction Quartet has made our own little attempt to raise awareness about it. Our album Rising that came out a couple of years ago, it features 3 commissioned works that are all either directly or indirectly related to the environment and climate change. For instance, one of the pieces is called A Sleep Talker Describes the Rising of the Seas. So that one's a little more on the nose. The composer Alex Van Gils had a vision while meditating of San Francisco being submerged by water. And as I saw your reaction, I remembered that, Alex through a mutual friend.
Hi, Alex.
That's cool. So his piece is, just a really vivid image of climate change and sort of to the extreme where like, okay, we can't even have San Francisco anymore because the ocean levels rose. And then Gabriella Smith, her piece Inyo is a bit more indirect. It's more of a love letter to the Eastern Sierra Nevada Inyo National Forest and just sort of the experience of hiking through it. But I think on that end, it's sort of the Eastern Sierra is super vulnerable to drought, of course. And so I think there's some connection there. And Max Stoff-Regan, California Crest, that's about his experience hiking up the Pacific Crest Trail from Mexico to Washington State. And one of the movements, Owens Lake is no longer a lake, it's just a lake bed. And so he was just imagining what would it be like if Owens Lake had water in it again. And we tried to be as environmentally friendly as we could when we made this album. Like we chose cardboard CD packaging, that used the least resources and things like that. And we have a statement in the album cover just about the urgency of taking care of the environment. So I know it's not as important as like the US investing $2 trillion in renewable energy or something like that, but it is in our own little way sort of connecting music with awareness of climate change.
Well, and I think that is also part of the job or responsibility of artists is to reflect the times and to reflect the urgency of certain matters. And, it's something to emote emotion in some way, to depict what's going on. And so, I mean, like, it's so great that you guys are making that such a huge mission for yourselves. Aside from any of the performance you do, what do you do in your life to help minimize your carbon footprint or your environmental, what's the word?
Yeah, like how do I take action, basically? Yeah. I mean, it's tough for me, I think, because I don't live in a state where my vote really makes that much of a difference. I live in a Democratic state and the Democrats are firmly, on the right side of this argument, I think. But I do now live in Contra Costa County, which is a bit more of a swing county. So I do feel like on the local level, my vote vote counts more. So I definitely try to be aware of who my representation is on a more congressional district level and city level, and make sure that I get my vote in and make my voice heard in that regard. And I guess just as one of the hobbies of mine is just reading about what technologies are going to be most impactful, like where do we, basically forming my own opinion about what is important for us as a society to do. Like I really believe in increasing our use of renewable energy, wind and solar, and also storage of the energy. We need to be able to hold a lot of that energy from the wind and solar to be able to use it when the sun doesn't shine or the wind stops blowing. I mean, it's kind of scary to see that a lot of times, even as we increase our renewables, our carbon footprint is still increasing. And that's because when the renewables aren't enough, we have to kick up the oil or the coal or the natural gas. So it's going to be a long process, but so I want to support candidates that believe in, investing in renewables and storage and things like that. So I guess that's one way that I can make my voice heard.
That's certainly true. I think any vote is incredibly powerful from any person. So I always encourage to vote. As many of the people know from my first season, I was very adamant about trying to get people to vote during the 2020 election. But as you're saying, it's also highly, almost even more impactful at the local level. So there's ways to go online and to look up when your local elections are going on. I think California just had one. There's a lot of change that can happen just by you taking 5 minutes to just look up when and where to vote and how to do so. And it's within your rights. What other sources of renewable energy or ways of reducing our carbon footprint or anything that you've researched?
Yeah, well, I've found out a lot about renewable energy sources, or actually energy sources that actually are carbon negative. Like there's a whole array of natural gases that actually are created through capturing methane and condensing it into a gas that actually is plug and play. Like you can run a truck or a plane with these renewable hydrocarbons. So I think that's incredibly powerful. We need not just the governments, but we need the corporations to get on board in going carbon zero or carbon negative. And the only way that's going to happen is having these sustainable fuels. We need all of our airplanes to run on fuels that actually create less carbon emissions than we removed from the atmosphere by creating those gases. So I think that's a really cool future-looking technology. And then, of course, we need the incentive for those companies that are building these technologies to be rewarded. So I think that can be done through carbon credits. So I think we really need an excellent kind of standardized system of creating these carbon credits and allowing companies to buy and sell them and kind of know what they're worth. So that Amazon, for instance, knows okay, I need to spend this much on carbon credits to offset all these other emissions I'm doing, just to keep everyone honest about what kind of damage they're causing or how much they're helping.
There's also hydrogen powered, technology I know that's been in the talks for many years because hydrogen is so volatile. What research have you?
I learned about this company called Bloom Energy that is working on a way to power our shipping vessels with hydrogen fuel cells. And it's interesting, this technology was actually created a long time ago in collaboration with NASA to somehow create hydrogen, I think, from water. So basically they charge the water with electricity to separate the hydrogen and then can use the hydrogen as fuel. So I think they're within a couple years away from being able to power our shipping containers, that travel across the Pacific Ocean with all of our stuff with hydrogen. And that would just be such a huge benefit to the atmosphere and also to the sea life below those ships, where oftentimes fuel is being dumped out or whatever. So
or oil spills or I mean, I'm just going to ask the cheeky question. I'm assuming this has to be fresh water for that to work.
Oh, for the water to be separated out. Yeah, I assume so too. But yeah, I'm not really sure about that.
So if we're having a water shortage, then
we need to be able to desalinate. That's another big one. Yeah, so I've actually found that you can create hydrogen fuel from fresh water and also from seawater.
Oh.
Traditionally it's been with fresh water, but there's new technology that uses this amazing mineral that I'm going to try to pronounce correctly, molybdenum. Uh-huh. And molybdenum is used in a device that researchers, I believe at Stanford, are working on, and they were able to split hydrogen from seawater and dirty water using molybdenum. And there's also another project that researchers are working on where we don't even need electricity to split the hydrogen, that we're actually able to do it with just sunlight, which is really crazy.
That is crazy.
So we can actually just create an endless source of hydrogen fuel using this mineral. Now, The issue with this mineral is that it is a rare earth mineral. There's a lot of demand for it because it's in all things that are made of steel. It's used to strengthen steel. It's also used in many different types of low carbon green energies like geothermal, nuclear reactors, solar, and wind. So it's in really high demand, and we are on pace to run out of this metal.
Right.
But if we can get better at recycling it and finding more of it and sort of sustainably mining it, it's a really powerful tool for us.
Yeah. I mean, of course, when you find a possible solution, you're going to encounter another problem along the way. At least though there's a promise for something that might be better for the future in the long term. Just whether or not it's, as you say, responsibly sourced, this molybdenum.
Molybdenum, yeah. It's a tongue twister.
Are there any other technologies that you wanted to bring up that might save the planet?
For sure. It's in the news a lot these days about the energy crisis going on. And basically, we've gotten ourselves into trouble relying on coal and natural gas when renewables aren't enough. And they're not going to be enough for a really long time. And the problem's been exacerbated because after the Fukushima incident, a lot of countries turned their backs on nuclear and it became really unpopular, nuclear energy. But it's actually the best low carbon baseload energy to complement renewables. It doesn't have any emissions, and it's actually the safest form of energy. If you look at deaths caused by the energy per terawatt hour of energy produced, it's the safest, which most people would be really shocked to know. You know, because it's sort of like with airplane crashes, like you hear about the crashes and then it feels like air travel isn't safe, but actually it's safer than driving. So it's kind of like that. So yeah, I feel like if we can just keep all of the nuclear plants that are up and running now up and running and continue to develop new technologies to make nuclear energy safer and more mobile and quicker to build and install, I think that will go a really long way towards fighting climate change so that we can have enough energy without producing greenhouse gases.
Yeah. How do you think we can fight the stigma of nuclear energy? Because, I mean, of course, as you just said, everyone thinks about these major disasters, like when, of course, Chernobyl also comes to mind, right?
For sure. Yeah. I think just talking about it and everyone kind of taking the initiative to look into it and find the truth themselves, because the media has really spun up this narrative. And I mean, The Simpsons are really guilty of kind of perpetuating misconceptions about nuclear energy.
Oh, is there an episode that
so Homer Simpson worked in a nuclear power plant, and throughout the entire show they portray the nuclear power plant in really inaccurate ways.
I see.
You know, for instance, showing mutant fish and showing liquid goo all over the place and showing Homer Simpson like working alone in the control room, like it's the law that you have to have more than one person in the control room, things like that.
Yeah.
So the combination of The Simpsons and the media, and also actually like the Democrats for the past several decades have been, you know, siding with environmental groups and being against nuclear. It's been really popular among Sierra Club and groups like that to be against nuclear, but it's really based on ignorance, to be frank. You know, a lot of people are worried about meltdowns, but accidents are very rare and becoming even more rare. People are worried about like where to put the spent fuel, and they call it waste, but it's actually just spent fuel that you can safely store in a container and it can just stay there forever. And there's a really striking image I saw recently of all of the spent fuel since 1969 that's been used by nuclear reactors in Switzerland. And it literally doesn't fill up one warehouse, like one basically swimming pool sized building. It's like 20 containers, you know? And I've heard that you can fit all of the spent nuclear fuel in the size of a football field all over the world. So I mean, I think it is an obstacle to figure out how to store this safely, but it's not something that we can't figure out as a society. And I think the risk of not pursuing nuclear energy as a sustainable, low carbon source of energy is a lot riskier than avoiding nuclear energy.
Sure. Is it possible that part of the reason why there's so little spent fuel since 1969 is because nuclear isn't the number one source of energy? So if we were to actually start using more nuclear energy, that there'd be therefore more spent fuel?
There would be more. for it, but not by much. I mean, you're only talking about 5 or 6 times more than what we've produced.
I see.
And also, new technologies are being developed that can reuse spent fuel and get more energy out of it. So, like, to even call it waste is not really accurate anymore because great new technologies that are coming out and being developed. And there was a really exciting headline today about France committing tens of billions of dollars to both nuclear energy technologies and hydro. So there seems to be, like, it's super divisive. I think 10 of the EU countries are for nuclear, and then 17, I think, are against it. Mm-hmm. But Finland just flipped, and the UK, not part of the EU anymore, but the UK just flipped and now supports nuclear. The new Japanese prime minister supports nuclear, which is huge because that's where Fukushima happened. So I think people are really nervous, realizing how energy prices are skyrocketing, and also just looking at the facts about nuclear and realizing, like, this is a really good solution that we should pursue. But it's such a hot topic of discussion right now.
Yeah,
like Gavin Newsom has not come around and supported nuclear, but Joe Biden has, and his administration, and like the Secretary of Energy is very pro-nuclear. So I think we're just at the beginning of this shift in sentiment, which is really exciting. So basically, Newsom wants to close Diablo Canyon, and it's a big problem. First of all, it's Diablo Canyon is the only remaining nuclear plant in California.
Oh, okay.
So PG&E has decided not to renew the license, basically, to extend the life past 2025, even though it very well could last until 2040 or something like that. And basically, once we shut it down, we're going to have to lean more on natural gas, and we're going to increase our greenhouse gas emissions by about 10% just by shutting down Diablo Canyon. But there are still 4 years left or so for Newsom to flip and support nuclear and get PG&E to extend the life. And there was just a plant extended in Illinois, which is exciting. So I think it's possible, and it needs to happen, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I could mention one other technology that I'm really excited about, which is the ability for electric vehicles to be used as storage for the grid. Because if we were to upgrade our grid to be able to use all renewable energy, it would cost just like trillions of dollars in upgrades and in energy storage. But, you know, we're already talking about switching over to electric vehicles. And that's a lot of batteries that aren't always being used. And so there's this company I'm really excited about called Nuvi that created software that can aggregate all of the electric vehicle batteries into a virtual power plant and can buy and sell energy from the grid. So basically, when renewables are failing and we're short on energy and demand is high, owners of vehicles can sell the energy in their batteries to the grid to make up that loss. And vice versa, when there's a lot of energy on the grid, like at night when everyone's sleeping, then the cars can charge up. And so I think that's a really powerful way to support our grid infrastructure. And obviously we've seen that's a big problem in California and in Texas with the winter storm. We need a lot more resiliency. And so I'm excited that, you know, in this bipartisan infrastructure bill, there is a lot of money to support grid infrastructure, because that's the only way we're going to be able to use wind and solar in any kind of sustainable way.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great point. Thanks for bringing that up, because I know that the more that we step away from natural gas and
oil, coal
and all that stuff, the more that we're going to be dependent on electricity, which also has its shortcomings as well, right? And yeah, it's an intriguing thought. And every time I see a Tesla or I see an electric vehicle on the road, my sister drives one herself, it always makes me excited to like see, oh, there's more. It's becoming more and more popular to do so. I hopefully eventually would love to get an electric vehicle myself, but
yeah, I mean, obviously it's like the price point is a big issue right now for most consumers, but we're getting there. Batteries are getting cheaper, and I think in the next 3 to 5 years it'll be more attainable for everyone.
I hope so. Yeah. But it is intriguing to think of what the cars can do in the meantime when they're not being used. You know, that there is still a purpose behind a vehicle rather than just it sitting in the sun or whatever. That is at least hopeful information. Again, it takes a lot of coordination and cooperation. And unfortunately, this has become so politicized these days that I feel like a broad community has lost the overall purpose and danger that might happen from ignoring the situation or choosing a particular currency over another. You know what I mean? But
Well, and I think also, I mean, if you look underneath the surface, I think it's also a big problem of money and politics, and like big oil and gas companies give a lot of money to candidates, and then candidates don't do the right thing, or not even candidates, like representatives, congressional representatives. So yeah, that's just a really depressing problem that hopefully we can get past once people realize like, oh, our planet literally is falling apart. It's time to turn our backs on the oil and gas companies and do the right thing.
Right. Or encourage them to change in some way. Now back to music. Other than your album and all the good work that you do there and commissioning other composers to write pieces, is there anything else through your musicality or your connection that you feel resonates with this cause?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we haven't really talked about the education aspect of what we do. It's been a big passion of ours to play in schools and to write presentations, basically choosing the music and writing the words that go along with it that really present the music in an attainable way or an understandable way for students, and provide activities for them to interact with the music and take something home after the presentation. So it's not just a concert where we talk about what we're playing, but we actually want to try and get the kids to feel the music and, you know, feel the rhythm and hear the different textures. And yeah, that's a really big part of what we do.
Okay.
Before I forget, I also wanted to mention that another way to reduce your carbon footprint is to make dietary alterations that are more friendly for the environment. So I'm not one myself, but I will choose more times than not to eat more on a vegan side of the diet spectrum.
Yeah, I totally agree. The mass meat industry is really irresponsible as far as greenhouse gas emissions. And meat is one of the highest forms of, or I guess it requires the most energy of any of the food we eat. And I think specifically beef. And so when we can cut back on our meat, like I think we need, as a society, we need to be okay with not having meat every day.
Right.
Because it's just not sustainable. And we need to be okay with alternative meats and lab-grown meats and things like that, and just eating a more plant-based diet.
Yeah. I also was listening to a podcast episode, I can't remember, I think it was on TED Radio Hour or something, about the future of protein being insects and how that, I mean, of course, no one wants to actually look at a bug and eat it, but this idea of grinding up insects and infusing that in certain foods, like your cereal or pasta, that's more undetectable, that maybe that's going to be a future as well that we have to start considering.
I actually ate some ants when I was in Mexico City, because that's a standard part of their diet. Yeah. And it was totally good. Had no complaints.
I mean, honestly, if you put butter and garlic on anything, it's going to taste wonderful, right? And the French have been doing it for years with snails, right? But it's even things like in our bars of chocolate, we know that there's insects in there sometimes, you know, but we don't even consider. I think if we can wrap our brains around the resource of actually eating protein from insects, that will also be another way of curbing the carbon footprint of consuming red meats or poultry and fish, despite I love that stuff, but like not red meat. But.
Yeah, it's delicious, but yeah, we don't need it as much as we have it, I think.
That's right. Sorry.
I heard someone.
Yes, that's sushi.
Doug, thank you so much for bringing this topic. It is so important to remind ourselves on a daily basis, if not on, a podcast episode, of the impending dangers of ignoring climate change. And not only voting, there's so many choices that you can make to reduce your footprint or be more sustainable. And I think that's always the goal on an individual level to do. I mean, from fashion, food waste, walking versus taking your vehicle somewhere, bicycle, whatever. I mean, there's just so many little options along the way that do help in a small percentage. And if we can all collectively rethink how we structure our livelihood and our convenience level and all these things, and I hope, and it's our hope, that we can do something. And I think that finally, hopefully very slowly, the political scene will change and start to incorporate this massive problem that we've unfortunately not have acknowledged as much for the past 30 years or so, 40 years plus.
Yeah, I think that was really well put. I think it's really helpful to have open discussions about these things and sort of try to spread the word that it's a good reminder to do our part, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, can I ask you two final questions? What is one piece of advice you would tell your younger self about entering and pursuing a music career?
Having the things to do list and really sticking to it, and like putting in some time every day to figure out what you need to do to achieve your goals, and then holding yourself accountable.
Wow. In other words, being organized.
Pretty much. Yeah, it's sort of like, it's the
Being
fuel that
organized
gets
and
everything going, right?
Yeah, I suppose if you structure out what you're going to do and you have a clear path, all you have to do is just walk that.
Yeah, half
right?
the battle is just doing it. Right?
That's true. And my second question, as we enter a post-pandemic world, I mean, again, I wrote this question like when I was way more hopeful back in June. So with a grain of salt, what elements of your musical pandemic life would you want to continue and what would you want to shed?
I've really enjoyed having like a lot of quality time at home with my wife and with my cat. And I think that's really refocused that priority for me as a true priority, and making sure not to like overwork myself or be away from home too much, because home and family, it's very, very important. So something I would want to shed from my pandemic life. Yeah, I guess I spent maybe more time just in internet wormholes than I want to in my post-pandemic life. So try to limit my screen time, my internet time a little bit, and practice and spend time with friends and family and go outside, things like that.
Nice. Okay. Are there any platforms or websites for listeners to learn more about you or any upcoming projects?
Yes, you can visit frictionquartet.com to learn all about our activities and our nonprofit activities. We're on all the streaming platforms, Spotify and iTunes, Apple Music, things like that. We're also on Bandcamp. We have our albums for sale there. Yeah, I want to give a shout out to Bandcamp because they provide the best deal basically for artists in terms of taking out the smallest share, and they often waive that fee. Like throughout the pandemic, they would just every once in a while waive the fees. So if you bought an album from an artist, the artist would get all the money. So I think Bandcamp is just the best platform for independent artists.
Yeah. And if you enjoyed listening, be sure to smash that subscribe button wherever you're tuning into this podcast. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts while you're at it. It doesn't need to be long. Your review will help others search for the podcast because of its crazy algorithms, and you'll make Sushi's day. And it's free. Make sure to share this podcast with your friends and family as well. If you want to level up, you can always become part of the Haydn Behind the Music Stand family by donating what you will on our Patreon page at patreon.com/Haydn Music Stand. Our social media handle for Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter is at Haydn Music Stand, and we'd love to hear from you at our email, haydnmusicstand@gmail.com. Didn't recognize a piece we discussed during the episode? No worries. There's a Spotify playlist with all the music discussed for your convenience. The link is in the description of each episode. Thank you so much, Doug, for joining me today and for speaking about such an important impending topic that we really need to, again, put our heads together and just do the smallest little change will make such a big difference.
Thank you so much for having me, Patty. It was a lot of fun to talk with you.
Yeah, and thanks for listening.
Sushi, say bye.